This is Bill Backel, managing editor of Crime, Justice, in America magazine. Duane Buck, a black man, was found guilty of capital murder in Texas. At the penalty phase of his trial, that's the follow-up trial in which jurors decide whether to recommend the death penalty, an expert witness, Dr. Walter Chiano, testified that black men are more likely than non-blacks to commit acts of violence. Buck was sentenced to death. In September, shortly before his scheduled execution, he was granted a stay, and he appealed his sentence before the U.S. Supreme Court on the grounds that race had played an improper role. Seems pretty straightforward, but here's where it gets interesting. Because Dr. Chiano was a defense witness. On direct examination, Dr. Chiano said that men are generally more violent than women, and blacks are generally more violent than non-blacks. He went on to say that despite this, based on other factors, he believed that Buck was unlikely to commit future acts of violence. Okay, now just for the record, Buck had broken into the home of his former girlfriend, shot her new boyfriend to death, shot and seriously injured the boyfriend's sister, then chased his former girlfriend into the street and shot her to death as well, all in front of her two children. One of the arresting officers quoted Buck as saying, "The bitch deserved what she got." So I'm quite impressed by Dr. Chiano's certainty that Buck would not be likely to commit future acts of violence. But strictly speaking, none of this is relevant. The prosecution, somehow without any objections by the defense, told the jury in its closing statement that Dr. Chiano had testified it was probable that Buck would commit future acts of violence. No specific mention was made here of race, but of course the prosecution was referencing and misstating his race-based analysis. Monday, the Supreme Court refused to hear Buck's appeal. Justice Alito said Buck would have had grounds for an appeal, and he himself might have favored a reversal of Buck's sentence if Dr. Chiano had been a prosecution witness, or if the prosecution had first brought up the subject of race. Justices Sotomayor and Kagan, speaking for the minority, favored a hearing on the grounds of the trial's racial overtones and the prosecution's misleading remarks. No new execution date has been set, and Buck's last hope now is clemency from Governor Rick Perry, who is, of course, running for president on a very conservative platform, and who has overseen, since he became governor, 235 executions.